Welcome to the second part of my CV1 Closure Series. If you haven't seen the first part, I highly suggest you do to learn about math chips. This video I will be explaining game chips and how they work. On a quick note, I'm sorry about my mic in the last video. I got a new mic, so hopefully the fans will stop being blaring into my mic. Anyway, let's get started. Unlike the math chips, I can't exactly explain the game chips all perfectly in order. There are certain key concepts that need to be explained before all of them in order can be completely explained as well. The game chips are also so complex that I'll have to make 2 other tutorials about 1. Player data and leaderboards, and for the other tutorial I'll have to talk about how roles work and the in-room settings for creators in general. Of course, to get started you're going to want to go to your watch, to backpack, and press Use on the maker pen. Alternatively, for screen-mode players, you can open the equipment wheel and go down to the maker pen. For VR players, if you have it favorited, you can also just grab it off your bag. To find game chips, you're going to want to go to your maker pen menu, press Open Palette, go to Gadgets, and then to Game Chips. As I said, when I teach these they're going to have to be out of order, but luckily we're starting with the key founding of game chips and just games in general, the game rules chip. The game rules chip is what's going to help you create your game. By configuring it, you can change many different settings, all to choose how you want your game to work. You can create things like paintball, stunt runner, quests, or really anything like a Rec Room original, or make your own type of game. I'm not going to be able to cover everything in the configure menu, because a lot of it's pretty simple. I'm only going to explain any complex things that many people have questions with. For starters, the mode name shows when you start the game what mode you're going to be playing. So like Team Battle, if you join like a paintball team battle match, it'll show Paintball Team Battle. Or instead, Capture the Flag. It'll show Capture the Flag as the mode for the game. For this tutorial, I'll have to be going into some extra things that I will cover later to explain exactly how the game chip works. This mode that I'm using is the scoreboard holotar, if you did not know. In simplistic, if you have 2 Rec Room games, you can change which Rec Room game you want. Let's say I wanted to name this game just something random, and I'll keep this one as Rec Room game. This will say, oh yes, I will be playing this mode or this game, or I wanted to be playing this game or this mode. As I said earlier, when you're starting a match or joining a match, this name, or the name of the mode, will appear in front of you just to clarify which type of game mode that you're playing. Now I'll dive more into the configurations. Game configurations make it exactly how Rec Room Originals operate. For example, if I were to set it to Stunt Runner, it'll apply all the Stunt Runner configurations. As you can see, now there's 4 players, and it'll play exactly how Stunt Runner plays. I think you can guess what these 3 do. With this said, here come 3 other chips that need to be explained first. To find these ones, they're all in the game chips. They're just the circuit boards, or pre-made circuits for how the games you want, or how you want the games to work, to make it more simple for people who just want to make paintball without having to learn all about circuits just to do so. Of course, there is no quest configuration. That is all done through the game rules chip. These 3 chips will operate exactly how you want the game to operate. For Capture the Flag, it'll say, oh yes, you have to have this many captures or this many points on the scoreboard to win the game, or have your team win. This will tell you how long you want the game's duration to be. That's about it for that simple chip. All it needs is power, and it'll start operating through these 2 systems. For power, you can just do it when a game runs with a future chip that I will explain. For Team Battle and Stunt Runner, it's pretty much self-explanatory for its configure options. On the same note, this pin will activate a number when it's active on the scoreboard. For example, since this configuration, or let me make it simple for you, since this configuration is not active on the scoreboard, it will not send an output. But since this one is, it will. But if I were to switch it, now this one's sending an output and this one is not. That only explains the first game rules portion of the configure menu. That's why I can't explain everything. It'll just take generally too long, and a lot of it is, as I said, self-explanatory. Any chips that are mixed in with any that I explain, I will bring in as I did the ones for the configure menu. For anything game start-wise, I'll have to summarize it all together with automatic or anything. Automatic is when there is enough players for the minimum. It'll just automatically start the game, and this is the amount of teams. For manual, you just have to press start here, and it just needs to meet these requirements. Show game mode notifications will just show the game mode that is selected, or the mode's name at the start of a game, as I said earlier what will happen in paintball or capture the flag. End game, if start requirements not met, is if there's not enough members on the team, or if there are not enough teams to continue the game. This will be like if you're in paintball and half the other team all completely leaves. The game will instantly end since there is no one to keep fighting. Team change during game supported is a special mode that you can turn on if you want people to be able to switch to a team that has like less people on it to balance out the teams. Things like laser tag have this to balance teams if you want to help the other team. What you can do is by going to this room, going to scoreboard, and there will be the switch team option during the game. Showing open slots on the scoreboard just shows you teams that are open if you want to join them. Now we go into player stats. This is going to have to go, all of the player stats are going to have to go in my leaderboard tutorial, because all of this is extremely complex. Teammate beacon method just shows you when there is like beacons on players like in Rec Royale. When a person is downed and able to be revived, there will be a big beacon on them. Team radios are just the comms that you can hear in laser tag when talking to people, or in Rec Royale. Persist game stats on game start is when you start a game, all the stats like, let's say you were playing capture the flag, if you press start again, those captures that you had from the previous game would still be on the leaderboard. Max health and max shield can just be explained if you just play Rec Royale, but in short, it's just the amount of health you have or how much damage you can take from preset weapons that they give you. Revive required delays. If you're playing something like laser tag, your teammate gets down, you have to wait a few seconds before you can high-five revive them. The HUD is the thing that appears in laser tag, like how many points are on a team. It just shows scoreboard stats, but for you in your little, well, just VR bubble or just on your screen for screen mode. Spawn main hand equipment type just spawns whatever item that you want that is preset, like a prop, to be put in your hand when you like spawn into a game, like how you spawn with a paintball pistol when you load into paintball. Honestly, I would not even try dealing with out of bounds, and I would just use trigger zones to respawn people. It's super unreliable and never completely works how you want it to. Finally, load priority allows you to determine what game modes will show up first on the leaderboard. So when you join a room, if this was selected at 1, once you join, this will be the first thing that appears in the game mode's load priority. That's really just the complex stuff that I will mention in this tutorial about the game rules chip that will apply to the other chips that I show you about. As I said, I did skip over a few things, but they're just pretty simple and I think you can figure them out pretty easily. Next, we're going to have to go to the second founding portion of the game chip section, the rules chip. We will have to skip over quite a bit of things, but don't worry, we will come back to them. It is on the second menu of the game chips, well, category. I won't be able to go into everything about how roles work in this video because it's going to be in my This Room settings tutorial that I'll be having later after my CV1 Closure Series. In simplistics, what it can do is it can set limits or allow things that people can do in your room. For starters, you want to press configure on it. You can set the role's name. This can really be only seen for you. You can press edit role, and you can set a bunch of different features. The role chip has many different features, and a lot of them are pretty much self-explanatory. These two are about movement methods. This allows you to set tags on items of things you don't want them to pick up. All the equipment slots enabled or restrictions ones allow you to set, for the two restrictions ones, tags that they cannot pick up or put on their hips, or just allowing hips to be active and completely. It would probably be easier to show on VR, but if I were to enable something like hip slots being allowed, I could pick this up and then equip it to my left hip, my right hip, or my shoulder, which would be my back. Of course, there's a shoulder setting apart from the hip settings. Voice roll-off distance determines how long or how far a person in the room can speak with someone hearing them. Hiding the player's name hides the names above their head, and hiding their avatar makes it so at a certain distance you physically cannot see their avatar. Locomotion is pretty simple, all of it is pretty much self-explanatory. I will go into detail about the next page though. Sliding down slope allows you to gain speed while sliding. It does not mean that if you have it off that you physically cannot slide. can get pushed means that your body is physical and can be interacted with, or like you have another force pushing back on objects, when normally if you had this thing off, you could walk through people. Can ram is just talking about like a bigger force of push. If you were to sprint into somebody, it'll push them longer distance, like in Stunt Runner. With created player roles, you have 3 roles that you start a room with. The everyone role applies to everyone. It cannot be removed, changed, or done anything with. You can edit basic settings of what people are allowed to do in your room. The eliminated role is given to a player when they are downed in the game mode. Lastly, the in-game role is to all players when they are in-game. If anyone is curious about role priority and understands it and how it can affect things, everyone's at the bottom, in-game is right above everyone, and eliminated is at the top. Short simplistics about how it works. Role priority is what roles when you override something will be overriding the thing below it. So if I had so that players cannot switch teams at the beginning of a game, or when people don't have the in-game role, when people are then in-game, they can now switch teams. That's pretty much it for the role chip. Now a lot of things will start getting back into order. Starting off with the game state chip. The game state chip is pretty simple. It has no configure settings, and it will send an output when the game has started, when the game has ended, and the pre-game has started. Game started means whenever the countdown on the scoreboard is done and the game has started, it'll send an output. Game ended means when the game is over, or you hear coach say game over, it'll send an output. Pre-game is like the lobbies after a game, or before you have started. This will then send an output once the game is over. On the opposite side of the game state chip, you have the set game state chip. This chip is also pretty simple. When this signal, or when this thing gets a signal, it'll start the mode that's on, or currently on the scoreboard, and when it gets this signal, it'll end the game that is currently playing. Of course, this chip is found on the second page, right here. Next, we have 2 chips, the set and get player stat chips. They're both quite far from each other on the Maker Pen menu, with one being on the first page, and the next one being on the second page. Starting off with the set player stat chip, this allows you to set player stats for the leaderboard or just anything in general. Like if I wanted to set my health to a certain point or a certain amount that the game chip allows, it'll set it to that number. This pin needs the player's output, or just the player signal. I believe I've talked about player signals before, but to mention it again, it's just the player number, or the player's numerical value that is given when it joins a lobby. Set just tells it when to set, and value sets it to the value that you want the thing to be set to. It has 8 different configurations with health and shield, and then the other 6 just being stats that I showed you originally that are all for the leaderboard. On the other side, you can obtain these stats through the get player stat chip. This allows you to, when inputting the player signal, to get an output of whatever the stat is. So if I wanted health, it'll tell me the health of the player. If I want shield, it'll tell me the shield of the player, or any of the stats for the leaderboard. Next, we have the get score chip. You can find the get score chip as the third thing in the game chip settings. Basically what it does is when you input the team, it's similar to a player value, except it's the team numerical down, so this would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. When you input this team, it'll output the score that it currently has on the scoreboard. With this, on the opposite side, you have the set score chip, where you can set the team, when to set the value to, the score that you want it to set the value to. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And if you want the team to be winning in the long run. I'll go more into depth about it in my leaderboard tutorial, because the scoreboard will also be mentioned with it. Of course, with that, we have the scoreboard setup chip, but that will be only in my leaderboard and slash scoreboard tutorial after I'm done with the Circuits V1 Closure Series. Of course, the two that I didn't mention are both on the second page. On the note of teams and player values, I will be going to the very last chip, the team mapping chip. This chip works in several different ways. There are 4 configure options: the player to team, the team to player, the set player team, and the get player team count. The first mode allows you to input the player data to get the team number, which can be inputted for the team here, and the index. The index is a tad bit complex. It's kind of just like a secondary player value for teams. It's really only used within the team mapper chip, so I wouldn't worry about it too much, and I just worry about hooking it up to a different team mapper chip. With the next mode, you have the inverse. If you give it the index and the team number, you get the player output. Set player team allows you to give the player output, and the team output, or the team that you want it to be set to, it'll instantly make them join that team. Finally, the get player team count is pretty simple. You just input the team number, and then you get the amount of players on said team. On the note of teams, we have the respawn chip. The respawn chip can be found on the second page right here, and has 2 main functions: respawning an entire team or respawning a single player. By giving this an output of the player, it'll respawn them instantly. The green output allows you to respawn the entire team. Next, we have the player event chip. Unlike game functions, it doesn't actually need a game to run. It just determines when people join the instance of the lobby, when a player has left the lobby, the number of players in the room, and when a player has switched teams. These 3 values all output the number, or the player value, of the person who either switched teams, left the game, or joined the game. Next, we have the player hit chip. Player hit chip gives the player output of the attacker, or someone who has killed a player. Or the family-friendly version, downed. This is the person who has been attacked, or killed, or downed. This is the team of the attacker, the team of the defender, and then the damage that they received. Second to last, we have the player revive chip. Sadly, it does not determine when you can revive a player that is downed. That can be done with the set player stat chip. Instead, what it does is it determines when a player was revived and outputs their signal, the person who revived them and what their signal was, the team that they're on, and the revived health that they have after they were revived. Finally, we have something that's tied to roles and not games: the role mapper chip. The role mapper chip allows you to add a player role, remove a player role, determine whether a player has a role, or if the player's role has changed. Whatever role that you're dealing with, you're going to want to pick the role or a role that you have created. So you cannot use the everybody, the in-game, or the downed chip for one of the roles that you can add. You'll have to use a role that you created. Starting off with the add player role, you can add a role to either a player or an entire team by inputting the team's number or the player's ID. The remove player role does the opposite. It removes the role from the player or the team that you input. The player has role allows you to input the player and then gives the player output back, and it also will determine whether they have the role or not. The player role has changed mode allows you to output a player whose role has changed from a different role mapper chip. With that said, that's the second part of my Circuits V1 Closure series. Thank you for watching, and in the next video I will be covering other chips.